maybe delay it 3 seconds to make sure you're out and about down a quarter mile. Nitrous RPM limit. This is basically in case you break a drive shaft or something like that, and make sure it shuts the nitrous off. We also have what's called dual AF target, air fuel target maps. This system has 3 of them. In Pro, you get up to 5. Turn it on. This is another target air fuel table. So, if you let's say you're hitting a car with a 200 shot, you want this to be about, let's say, 12-to-1. And the rest, let's say you want to interpolate. Interpolate, you hit I, you hit enter twice, and it saves it. Basically, instead of changing every number by hand to make it in a ladder form, it does it for you. So now your nitrous hits, and as RPMs come down, you'll hit 12-to-1. Some people don't want 12-to-1, let's say in lower RPMs, just after the converter comes in. But then when you shift gears, that 1500 RPM drop or that 1200 RPM drop, let's say, you can actually go richer. Anytime you leave the line, especially in first gear, if you don't go the full amount of fuel that you normally do the carburetor, the car will pick up out of the gate. It's a guarantee. That's ET on top end whenever you do that. So now, with the wideband, we can come in here and you can do 2 things. You can do an engine saver mode, another safety. What that does is, let's say, like I said, you're about 12-to-1, right? Well, it starts to go lean. You can tell that at 13.5, kill the nitrous. Or at 13.0, kill the nitrous. And in closed loop, when that's enabled, that's what it's going to do. It's going to attempt to keep it at 12-to-1 the entire time and it goes down the track. It will adjust the fuel plus or minus 25% to give you that 12-to-1. In Pro, you get 3 stages. Now, in this system here, we only give you 35 screens to get into. So for the end user, this is similar to like an entry level. Thruster is an entry level system that doesn't get the end user lost. But some of the things we do give the end user is individual cylinder control. If you pull spark plugs out, means let's say 1 and 2 are super lean, you can add fuel only to 1 and 2. And that's even in 3D. Always lower versus RPM. All of the systems, they give you cylinder 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you put a number. If you think number 1 is rich, you pull 5% out. Or lean, you add 5%, let's say, right? The problem is you just added it to the entire spectrum of RPM and load. So you start it up, it's idling 5% rich. Or maybe it doesn't need it at idle. Why add 5% of fuel at idle? Okay? Maybe it doesn't need it at mid-range. You're cruising down the freeway, why is it adding 5% fuel? All you're doing is wasting gas and possibly washing rings. So what we do is only where you need it, you add it. EGTs are great for that, of course, or a single wideband. Some people have 8 widebands on their dyno to do that. And you can view it. Say, okay, this cylinder needs a little bit more fuel here, not as much there. I mean, I got guys when you tune it, you'll see numbers all over the place on one cylinder, because that's what they did. They marked the dyno in every cell and found out what it needed on that cylinder to match all the rest. That's how GM does it. That's how Ford does it. Chrysler does it. That's how you major companies do it. One of the things we give you, and this is back to why is the system drivable on the street? Well, you have 300 horse or 800 horse, 900 horse like I had. I used to drive on the street. I had no issues with it. It drove like a normal vehicle. We have what's called a tau versus map, or in this case we called it acceleration, deceleration fueling. This is load versus temperature. What this does is, you've all seen how the carburetors, they got the plastic cam. This emulates somewhat the plastic cam. And what it does is, it's called, it produces a puddling effect. Basically, instead of being in the middle of the manifold, it's producing it on top of the valves. So, the second you touch the throttle, if this is set up right, your car will leap like a rabbit out of the gate. I just had a system done, an HRIA guy, he had somebody else's system on. He wasn't mad that the other guy's system wouldn't run the car good, in fact, the car ran decent. What he was mad about is, 3 or 4 times he sent the system back and he kept having an issue with the fuel pump. If you're making a pass, we'll shut the fuel pump off. And he always liked the fact that the ECM controlled the fuel pump because, God forbid, you wreck the ECM, the minute the engine dies, it will kill the fuel pump. That's how most fires really go out of control in race cars, because they got a fuel pump on a switch. You hit the wall, you're not thinking of shutting the fuel pump off, you're thinking of getting the heck out of the car. Fuel pumps on, goes crazy, fuel lines are, break, are on fire. In this case, the second the engine dies, fuel pump shuts off. Well, his problem is, never hit the wall, he's making a pass, boom, fuel pump dies. So we sent him one of our systems, and I basically made up a program for him, emailed it to him, said, just use this, it'll get you close. Well, which is what he did. He called me up, he goes, you almost killed me. I'm like, what did I do? He goes, the car stood up on a bumper, never did that before. I go, well, how do you mean? I go, you got a trans brake. He goes, I don't really care about trans brake. He goes, I left off the brake and the thing went straight up in the air. So what this system does, and this is very important that you understand it, is an engine drives a car, right? It drives the transmission with steering the wheels. How fast does the engine drive the car determines how fast you get out of the gate. This system helps drive the engine at a higher rate when it comes to electronic response and timing. So what happens is, and I showed this to Mr. Bill Mitchell, Sr., I whacked the throttle with a carburetor, and he was freaked out because he thought it was going to backfire and make a mess on his dyno. Then when we switched to the DFI system, now when I whacked the throttle with a 1050, I had to come up on the cam, roughly 3,000, 4,000 out of the cam and wet. And it still was lazy. He goes, all right, we put this setup on. I did the same thing with this, only I didn't bring it up on cam. I just went from idle, and I just whacked, and the motor almost jumped off the dyno. He's like, how's that possible? Again, we're not waiting for the fuel to come down to the valve. The fuel is already there. How the fuel is delivered, at what rate of timing and speed is what makes the difference. When I switched from another system on that green Trans Am, the car went from 1070 to 1042 on the first pass. I didn't do nothing else. I just switched the DFI systems. All the ET came in the first 300 feet. The car 60 foot better, the car left harder. It never used to pull the wheels more than 3 inches off the ground. It started pulling the wheels at least 1.5 to 2 feet off the ground. So there is a difference in EFI systems. I don't care what anybody says. I even put the word out that, and I got a big mouth sometimes, I will let's build a motor, let's one of the engine builders build a motor. We'll invite all these guys that build EFI systems, and let's do an EFI shootout. Who has the best EFI system for the money? So far, nobody can pick me up on it. So now, the next thing I'd like to show you is that for the guys that have major camshafts, you got a 280-50 cam. So you got no vacuum. Remember that plow versus map works on low. So that's factory. No vacuum, it's 100% wide open throttle normally. You have decent vacuum, it's up on the top, towards the top of that page. Now you have no vacuum, you have 5 to 10 inches of vacuum in a motor. So now your acceleration kind of starts to, not be that good. Wrong. Now we help it using TPS rate of change. We actually add, this is the bottom is your TPS percentage, and this is pounds per hour on the side. So now we kind of help it along. And it still accelerates at a higher rate of speed. Acceleration fuel modifier. Same thing, I go back to the carburetor, make it simple. This is the squirter side.